Right, so the ongoing atrocities being committed by the unelected and self-imposed Syrian government has continued to take even more dark and disturbing turns, with the HTS-led administration of Ahmed Al Sharaa carrying out further brutal massacres against ethnic and religious minorities within their own country. Well, they've now managed to earn themselves the attention of the Houthis of Yemen, already having handed an ultimatum to Israel to lift their aid blockade on Gaza, now potentially sizing up Al Sharaa's bunch. Right now, only with a war of words, but they've not held back on the words either. For as much as the Houthis themselves come in for much global criticism, they've stood by the people of Gaza in the face of genocide, and they are now standing up for persecuted minorities in Syria. It's refreshing that someone actually is, isn't it? It's rather depressing that they come in for attack themselves as a result of it, but the one thing you can count on is that they couldn't care less what others say about them. They'll do what they feel is right. And while the media spin like mad in favour of the likes of Israel and Al Sharaa, it should serve to remind us all how little some media outlets are worth paying attention to on such matters. Right, so the Houthis have come for Al Sharaa in Syria in light of the brutal atrocities his HTS-led forces of former Al-Qaeda cast-offs have been meting out on ethnic minorities within their own country, particularly targeting groups such as the Alawites, but also the Christians. And when we in the West live in what are ostensibly Christian countries, the level of comfort some of our governments have in siding with the terrorist Al Sharaa, or Al Jalani if you prefer, and especially in light of the act of terrorism his forces are perpetrating right now, well, I find it rather disturbing. I don't know about you. But Christianity aside, the Houthis have really gone for Al Sharaa, and it's worth the time to look at this excerpt from Press TV's coverage of the Houthis' commentary to explain just how damning their comments actually have been, courtesy of their leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi. The excerpt reading: Abdul Malik al-Houthi made the remarks in a televised speech broadcast from the Yemeni capital Sana'a late on Sunday, on the 9th night of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. He warned that the consequences of the atrocities will be severe for the Takfiris themselves, as well as their sponsors who think they are secure under the protection of the United States and certain European countries. Takfiris in Syria are serving the interests of Israeli and American enemies by tearing apart Syria's social fabric. This comes as Americans and Zionists are seeking to portray themselves as the advocates and saviours of Syrian people, he said. The Ansarullah leader pointed out that Israel has declared its protection for the Druze community in Syria's southern province of Suwaida, stating that Takfiri groups do not dare to harm them and treat them with respect. Americans present themselves as protectors of Kurds in the areas where they are present, in northern Syria, arming and recruiting them. However, the rest of the Syrian society is targeted, because they are neither under US protection like Kurds, nor under Israeli patronage like members of the Druze minority, Houthi said. He stated that Syrians are simply getting killed in cold blood without any objection or criticism from the Arab and Muslim world. Houthi also described the brutality and criminality of Takfiri groups in Syria as an American Zionist scheme, asserting they are their creation, nurtured and prepared for such a role. The Ansarullah leader stated that Takfiri served the Zionist objective of tarnishing the image of Islam. Had the militants been genuine warriors and engaged in true jihad, fight for God, they would have confronted the Israeli enemy. They are not pious, but rather criminals who adhere to falsehood, Houthi concluded. There's a little bit to unpack there, but it's worth it. And the one word I want to focus on most of all is takfiri, which means for a Muslim to essentially excommunicate another Muslim. You can imagine that's quite a severe thing to do, or to accuse them of being apostate for whatever reason. But it goes beyond even that simple meaning, quite severe meaning, when it comes to a Shia Muslim saying it of a Sunni Muslim. The Houthis are Shia. Al Sharaa and his Al-Qaeda cast-offs, as I've spoken about previously, follow an extremist version of Sunni Islam called Salafism. And for a Shia to call a Sunni takfiri carries a little bit more weight. It's used as a direct insult, even one that may carry the threat of violence. And you'll note Abdul Malik al-Houthi used that word over and over to describe the new Syrian regime. He pointed out that Israeli insurgents into Syria, ostensibly to protect minorities, meant the Druze, though Syrian Druze are not all welcoming of Israel, and thus Al Sharaa left them alone, and the same could be said of the US-backed Kurds in the north, and therefore Al Sharaa instead attacks the Alawites, because Al Sharaa and his Takfiri administration are a construct of Israel and the US, and it's very hard to argue otherwise when Al Sharaa is busy attacking Syrian minorities, as Israel is literally invading his country. An American Zionist scheme tarnishing Islam, it's a particularly scathing attack there. The Houthis' condemnation of Al Sharaa's al-Qaeda leftovers is significant for several reasons as well, though. First, it highlights the extent to which the HTS-led administration has become a pariah even among groups that are themselves embroiled in conflict, even if the Houthis are still technically between conflicts at this point in time due to the Gaza ceasefire. 2 days to go, Israel, to lift that blockade. But secondly, it underscores the severity of the crisis in Syria too, when groups like the Houthis feel compelled to speak out against these atrocities, especially in light of foreign powers who have enabled the crimes the HTS-led government have committed. It's like the Houthis are painting a picture of commonality between those they have already been taking to task and those they may well involve themselves with yet as well. Who'd put it past them at that? The HTS-led administration, which, as we ought to know by now, emerged from the remnants of al-Qaeda's Syrian affiliate, the al-Nusra Front, have been accused of carrying out a systematic campaign of violence against ethnic and religious minorities in Syria. And the HTS-led government's attacks on minorities have now entered what they're calling phase 2 of its operations. And this phase apparently involves the indiscriminate shelling of the Syrian coast, a region home to significant Alawite and Christian populations, and further inland as well. The attacks have resulted in widespread destruction, loss of life, entire communities being impacted. The HTS-led government has justified these actions as necessary to root out Assad loyalists, inverted commas. But the reality is that they are part of a broader campaign of ethnic and religious cleansing because there is no Assad regime anymore to be loyal to. Assad has gone. While the HTS-led government bears direct responsibility for the massacres, the Syrian government under Bashar al-Assad cannot escape blame for the broader context in which these are taking place. The Assad regime's brutal crackdown on dissent during the early years of the Syrian civil war and beyond have created the conditions for extremist groups like HTS to emerge and flourish and bring us to where we are today with them meting out the atrocities. The Syrian government's response to the HTS-led massacres has been tepid at best. Well, what a surprise. While it has apparently informed an independent committee to investigate the incidents that have happened in Latakia and Tartus, critics have just argued that this is little more than a public relations exercise because these are the government's own people committing the crimes. The committee's findings are therefore unlikely to lead to any form of meaningful accountability, particularly given the regime's history of using violence to maintain its grip on power, as has been demonstrated in its control of the Idlib province, where HTS have held power for years before Assad fell. The international media's coverage of the HTS-led massacres has been an utter disgrace as well, with some outlets, the usual suspects, appearing to downplay or distort the severity of the atrocities being committed. If you want distortion of news headlines, where better to start than with the BBC, which have literally described the ethnic minorities under attack as being the ones that have been destabilising Syria, therefore implying that the violence being meted out by HTS on them is somehow justified. This framing is very inaccurate. It's also deeply harmful. By portraying the victims as aggressors, the BBC and other media outlets risk legitimising the HTS-led government and their campaign of terror. It also obscures the fact that the real destabilising force in Syria is the HTS-led government itself, which emerged from a terrorist organisation and continues to act like one, using violence to achieve its goals, stoking division across the country, especially amongst minorities. But then look at how they report Israeli atrocity and ask yourself why you should be at all surprised that this is the narrative they're carrying. Syria's government atrocities have also created a dilemma for Turkey, as it happens as well, which has forged close ties, as we know, with Ahmed Al Sharaa's administration, and they are supposedly helping Syria draw up a new constitution, aren't they? Well, Turkey's support for HTS has been driven by its desire to counter the influence of the Assad regime and its allies, but this strategy is now backfiring in light of these atrocities that have been committed by the Al Sharaa administration. You see, Turkey also has significant Alawite populations, and they have been kicking off royally at President Erdogan over his support for the new Syrian regime, with Alawite communities in the southeast of the country demanding that Erdogan take a stronger stance against the massacres of their people in Syria. These protests highlight the growing divisions within Turkey over its Syria policy. While Erdogan has sought to position himself as a defender of Sunni Muslims and his support for the HTS-led government is firmly nailed on, this has ended up alienating Turkey's own Alawite minority, which make up a significant portion of the population in southeastern Turkey. If these divisions continue to grow, well, they could undermine Erdogan's domestic support, but I've little sympathy for him if he chooses to make his bed that way. The Houthis' condemnation of the HTS-led massacres in Syria have been a significant intervention in a conflict that has been marked by much in the way of hypocrisy and double standards. It is also a reminder of the urgent need for accountability and justice in Syria, because removing one regime to replace it with another bad regime, as the first one was, that isn't the change the region needed or hoped it was getting. The HTS-led government's campaign of terror against ethnic and religious minorities is a crime against humanity. Here we go again. And those held responsible, as ever, must be held accountable. Meanwhile, it isn't just the Houthis kicking off at HTS either, but an all-new group has emerged there now to take on Al Sharaa and Israel as well, as it happens, underlining all the more that the change Syria has seen is not the change that is needed. Find out all about this new faction positioning itself as for the people of Syria against the new regime in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new content published daily, as well as supporting the channel, which is very much appreciated, holding power to account for ordinary working class people. And I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.